Hello, everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis. I am Dennis, and this is the Saturday live stream that I like to do on Saturdays. And so we are going to go ahead and we're going to get started. Today, I actually have 4 new releases that I want to go ahead and discuss from a variety of brands, including Nomos, Chopard, Daniel Roth, and Swatch. So the cover image has indicated what the discussion will be regarding the Swatch. However, I'm going to save that one for last because timing is everything. So that being said, in terms of housekeeping items, like I like to start with at the start of these live streams, I have done a couple of videos actually over the last week. So one of them is and I'll put a link in the live chat for people, but one of them, the more recent one was, I have a little short video that I put together regarding the new version, the Illyrian sand-based Christopher Ward Dune watches. I normally would have gone ahead and done that as a full first thoughts video where I would have given my my opinions on that watch set. Overall, I guess if you want me to throw it in here, I would say like the dials I thought were pretty attractive. I like wave style dials. I have always liked that about the Omega Seamaster 300M. So I like the look of those wave patterns, but I don't normally have much interest in field watches, and those are really field watches. I had one field watch in my time, not counting like pilot watches, which I suppose are a subset of field watches, and I just don't wear them. So anyway, the information from Christopher Ward came in the day before. So Christopher Ward is one of the watch brands that will actually often send me embargoed photos so I can work on videos ahead of time, but with less than a day's time period before that lifted, I thought I only had enough time to really put together a short. So, and then I ended up having to edit that thing more than you would think because the images were completely uncooperative when I would do pan and zoom effects and it would start glitching out. So I ended up having to spend a whole hour like trying to just get the images to sync up properly. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I had a bad download. The zip file was being uncooperative. Whine. Back in sort of, back of the house stuff going on there. So had that. And then the other video, which I put out a few days before that, was actually, this is a regular full length pre-recorded video, was regarding the top 5, my current top 5 favorite big date watches. So I guess Joel Bolt, who's a regular viewer of this channel, had asked me about my what my favorite big dates were. And so I was like, you know what? I don't put a lot of lists together on most things. So I was like, I didn't inherently have a list. So I knew of a few that I really, really liked, like Glashütte Original, Langenzona, a couple brands that are very well known for having a lot of models that use big date. So I mean, those were 2, but I needed another 3. So I went in and dove into that. And in fact, one of those is going to be involved today. And it was sheer coincidence. It worked out the way it did, but I'll explain that when we get to that part. And then finally on the wrist today is my Rolex Explorer 2. This is the 16570 polar dial version. I've owned this watch now about, 19 years maybe. It's my oldest watch. It's not necessarily my oldest watch. It's not my oldest watch for sure. My Spiro Agnew watches are far older, but it is the watch I've owned the longest that I wear. So with all of that out of the way, I will go ahead and get caught up with the live chat. Thank you for everyone who's been able to tune in live. Thank you if you click like and you enjoy the video. Of course, those are 2 separate things. You might end up clicking like and hating the video. You could always unclick like if you ended up not liking the live stream. That is an option. It does work. I have done it to channels before where I was like, it was going so good. And then no, it went so wrong. So it does happen. But anyway, I appreciate everyone who's able to tune in live. And of course, anyone who's watching the recording, feel free to share your comments on any of these watches that we go over in the comment section. I do go back. I do read those. I often reply to them, especially if you ask questions and such. So anyway, let me go ahead and start with that chat. So good morning, Tuna. Welcome to the live stream. And thank you for being a 99-cent club member. Thomas with the Escapement Show saying, I liked your Christopher Ward video, Dennis. The wave dials looked nice. Yes, I think Christopher Ward has done a lot of very interesting dial work lately. I've still never owned a Christopher Ward. I don't know if I ever will or won't. But I thought that, especially with like the bronze cases, I guess those would have been my favorite of the new Christopher Ward Illyrians that they have come out with. Rob, good morning. Thank you for being a club member. Koji, good morning, and thank you for being a club member. Koji says, I didn't realize the smaller Mito didn't have the big date. What a shame. Thanks for the video. Yeah, that's really why I haven't, honestly, but I haven't pulled the trigger on one. You can find them, as I said in my video, you can find Mitos under $1,000 new for days on eBay, for days. They're all over the place. So you go and you look multi-fort. There's multi-fort TV and there's multi-fort TV big date. All the big date ones are over 40 millimeters size, though. And just given the lug to lug and everything else about the watch, I just worry that I've not tried one on, and I might try one. I don't know if I'm sure there's someone who sells Mito in the Kansas City area, but I don't have it off the top of my head. But the smaller ones I know I could wear. The problem is, yeah, they are a single date disc format. It's still overall the same structure look of the watch. So if you like the multi-fort TV look, it may be a good option for you. But for me, half of the reason I like it is the big date. And if I lost the big date, I lose all interest in owning a Mito multi-fort. So anyway, it's just one of those things. When you zoom in, it then becomes apparent. But from a distance, it's still the date's in the same place and everything. So, and instinctively, you wouldn't think so, but that's what they did to save the size, in part at least. So Thomas says, one of my favorite big date watches is the Breguet 5817 ST Marine. Is that the prior generation Marine? I would have included it because I also really like that watch a lot. Federico with Federico Talks Watches has one of the old Marines. However, the new gen of Marine is not, I don't like the look of it. So, in fact, I don't even know if any of the current generation Marine watches have big dates. I don't know why Breguet moved away from such a nice look. I know they struggle with all of their watches, but it's unfortunate because those Marines, and you can find them quite accessibly. They have them in steel and they have them in gold. And you can find both pretty easily, like on Chrono 24 and such. So if you want to explore it, I would suggest it because, again, you still have like hand guilloche worked dials. They do a lot of spiral pattern and stuff. They look really, really good. When I got my Breguet Classique, I did consider getting the older Marine, but ultimately I just wear dress watches. Don't get me wrong, the Marine can totally be executed as a dress watch if you wanted to. Just put it on a leather strap. But in the end, I wanted to go for the slimness of the Classique, and I do already have a big date in my Longa one, so the need for the complication isn't like it was for me a couple of years ago. And so all of that, we're caught up. Let's go ahead and let's start. I'm going to start with Chopard today. Oh, I want to say greetings to Richard. Welcome to the live stream. Glad you were able to join us. Okay, so I said 4 watches today. I want to start with the Lunar One. The Lunar One is not a new model line that's been around for quite a while. This is the 3rd generation of the Lunar One. And the reason why I'm starting with it is because of those big date watch discussions that I mentioned. And Al, I see, just said, I want to interrupt with this. Did I hear you correctly that the Mito Multi-Fort is greater than 40 millimeters? Sorry if I misheard that. And Jumma Shop, it says 39. You did not mishear it. I misspoke. It is not. I worry about the 39 with the lug to lug, but I don't remember the lug to lug distance on the Mito. Jumma Shop might say, but yes, 39. I still worry, given the configuration of the watch, that it wears too big for me. So, and the smaller one, unfortunately, does not have the big date. But thank you for the correction. No, I did say 40 millimeters, over 40, and it is not. I forgot. Okay, but I didn't forget about this. So, Chopard. So I use this salmon dial one here, and all the links to the news articles today are in the video description. And so this is one of 3 that have come out. There are 2 of these moon phases, and there's one that's a tourbillon. And for, again, long time, I don't say it all that much, I guess, but I always say this phrase. For long-time viewers, you were probably quite aware that I don't think much of anything about tourbillons. I have zero interest in the tourbillon. Because it's such a worthless complication. I get that it looks cool, but its frivolity, wrongs me in some way. I don't know how to describe it. I don't like tourbillons, which is just as well because they tend to be very, very expensive. Anyway, I'm getting on a sidetrack. I used this watch. I just had gone to Chopard's site because I did some searching and heard that Chopard had big date watches. And I think it was regarding a prior generation of the Lunar One that showed up in some search. I went to their website. I had not realized these had just come out that week. Like they hadn't even been out 7 days. And so I grabbed this watch not knowing it was brand spanking new. So anyway, total coincidence. I then saw later after my video was released that there were people doing reviews of this watch. And I was like, wait a moment. Am I getting like, is the algorithm throwing Chopard Lunar Ones at me because I just did a video about them? And so I did some searching to learn about them. And then I'm like, oh, no, this is a wholly new one. So anyway, So there you go. It doesn't have to be this configuration, but again, they've gone through several iterations. So here's actually all three of them together. The watches in this new generation, if you are familiar with the Lunar One, and I was not, I like Chopard, I like their LUC line. The Lunar One, which is the perpetual calendar line, has not been one I have historically explored from them. But I believe it was where they first did their first, at least complicated in-house movement. And so they have a fondness for it. And again, they've kept it around for quite a while. The center one is the tourbillon yellow gold with like a hunter green dial. These are all 40.5 millimeter cases. You have the pink gold version with a blue disc, which I think a lot of people, that might be their favorite. But then there's also the white gold version with the salmon dial, and white gold and salmon tends to look really, really good. So I prefer that one a little bit, but pink gold generally wins me over anyway. But I like this photo that A Blog to Watch had because it would let you get a sense of it. Here are all three gens. So here's that pink gold or rose gold with the blue dial, the new one. So this is the current iteration. This was the second gen. They inflated the size of the watch. I'd have to check. I think it got up to 43 millimeters in diameter here. The original first gen, which you can always tell because they have these huge Roman numerals at the 4 and the 8 o'clock position. This was also 40.5 millimeters. I don't really care for this, mostly because of the cropping that happened to the numerals, and not to mention 43 millimeters seems pretty big. I mean, it's not pretty big for a perpetual, but it's pretty big for me. Though some of their other choices they made in terms of the dial, sub-dial size and stuff is pretty attractive, I think. But I don't like how they crop into hour markers. Again, not a surprise to long-term viewers. Obviously, on the new generation, they've avoided it by finally shedding the Roman numerals outright. However, this first one in an early 2000s way, which I think was around when it came out, this is a very interesting sort of vibe. So sort of cool. But anyway, these older ones, by the way, they do, like most Chopards, take a huge bath on the secondhand market. I mentioned that in my video. These new ones are like $80,000. I don't know what these initially retailed at, but I've seen Chopard Lunar Ones under 40,000. So don't get me wrong, very, very, very expensive. But also, when it's over half off, that's a pretty good savings. But again, used. You have to go used. I don't know about new old stock access on these things. But anyway, so yeah, 43 millimeters was the second gen. So they're back down to the 40.5 millimeters. I mentioned the types of gold and stuff. These are, this is interesting. This is an interesting close-up I want to go ahead and show. So there is a lot of craftsmanship going on. So this is hand guilloche. So if you're a fan of Breguet, you'll probably appreciate that the dial maker that Chopard uses did do. In fact, I think Chopard owns the dial maker. Chopard doesn't do the dials in house. They own the manufacturer of the dials, or the people that make the people that make the dials, and they allow that company to do high-end dials. They do dials for other brands. Now, this is a lot more than a lot of Breguets. So if you want hand guilloche, I'd still say always start with used Breguet because they tend to be the most affordable. But you'll see here a lot of times the dial's made out of brass. They have made the dials out of gold, which again, that's something Breguet often does. So Chopard's doing it here. The reason why I've zoomed in on the big date, because we were just talking about big dates. We all love big. I haven't met anyone who hates a big date. I'm sure there's someone that does. Feel free to speak up in the, well, maybe not. You might get pilloried. Leave a comment if you hate big dates. It'd just be good to know. But see this framing in gold? They filed this. So they galvanized the color on top of these dials. This is filed down. So this is the dial without the paint on it. They like paint it, and then they carve out the disc windows, and then they file it. So you're actually seeing the natural color of the gold underneath that's showing through. So they did that here. I think they've got it on a couple of other spots on the watch as well. On some other edge work, if I remember correctly. I think these sub dials. I want to see if there's here. So here's the white gold shining through. Again, they filed all that down. They filed the salmon away, so you could see the original gold of this is extremely rare to see done. I almost never see it happen with a dial. Usually they just leave it all painted, or frame is added in. They don't file it down to expose the metal for the frame. So yeah, you have all of that. In terms of some of the other features, again, you have I don't love the north-south hemisphere thing. We talked about that on a prior live stream, but I think it's integrated pretty well here in terms of how it spins. Like this is the part spinning around. But You've got the 24 hours with a nifty little groove here. So the day night has this like dividing line. There's just a lot of thought, a lot of detail that's gone into this. And of course, it's an interesting guilloche style pattern. You got the leap year markings and the months over here because this is a true perpetual calendar. So overall, also nice little touch. You got like the Southern Cross here, and then you've got the Big Dipper here on the moon phase for the moon phase versions. So here's a close up of the tourbillon version if you want to see that. So instead of the moon phase, that's where they've gone ahead and they've inserted the tourbillon for those of you that are into that sort of thing. I am not. Pricing I mentioned is about $80,000 or 80,000 Swiss francs. I don't remember. I know it's here at the bottom of the article. That's why I'm scrolling down. Unfortunately, a blog to watch does not cluster their specs all together in a box, so it makes it a little frustrating. But they had some excellent photos, so I wanted to go ahead and rely on them. A lot about the manufacturing is included in this piece, and again, it's linked below. So it might have been around 80,000 Swiss francs. It's 85,500 US for the rose or white gold. Tourbillon is $184,000. So these are extremely expensive watches, but there's a lot of impressive craftsmanship. So I did want to go ahead and point them out. The movement, it's not always the case, not surprised at this price point, but this is a Geneva sealed. There's the hallmark there on the far left. Sealed movement, micro rotor. This is the style that we're often familiar with seeing out of Chopard. But again, this one is a highly complicated iteration of it. So let me go ahead and get caught up with the chat. We have Thomas saying these LUCs are stunning, really expensive though. Yes, we have to hope that they will take the bath that we normally associate Chopard taking on the secondhand market. Watches for you. Good morning, Dennis. Nice job on the short. Well, thank you very much. I don't do a lot of shorts. Usually most they're like wrist shot sort of things. And I notice I go months without them. I don't know if they're a good way to engage the channel or not, but sometimes it's fun just to work in a different format anyway. Koji says, ethical white gold? Question mark. Look, Chopard leans in on this, but here's something. Your comment here reminds me, because I did actually read this article. So, here's the thickness, 11.63 millimeters. So it's actually surprisingly thin. I thought this was going to be over 13, given it was a perpetual, but given the in-house structure and the non-modularity that I think they've run with, that's probably how they've been able to achieve it. However, that's an aside. You mentioned the thing about the ethical, and it may just be an issue with the article itself in terms of how they wrote it up. But here's the relevant section. They talk about one version, the salmon version, an 18-karat ethical white gold. Then they have the 18-karat ethical rose gold for the blue one. But for the tourbillon, it says 18-karat yellow gold, not ethical yellow gold. So we can only assume that this is unethical yellow gold, and thus another reason not to support the tourbillon version, because there were no ethics involved in the making of this dial's gold. No ethics whatsoever. Or they neglected to put that part in a blog to watch article. I didn't go back and check with Chopard because I really didn't care because I don't like that version. But anyway, one of those things. Jason with Design Atelier, greetings from Aruba. Welcome to the live stream, Jason. Hope things are going well for you. And Junior, welcome. Hello from Michigan. Well, hello back from Kansas. Tuna says, fantastic watches, but convoluted for my simple taste. I mean, the price is pretty convoluted for my simple wallet in and of itself. Again, this is one of those things where it's like you put it on a winder because you don't want to mess with this over time, sort of thing. But very, very, very attractive design. I really like a lot of what's coming out of Chopard. And I've actually been a pretty, I don't want to say big fan. I've been a decent fan of the Alpine Eagle as well for the sports watch line. It's one of those where you feel like it's almost waiting to remind you of a Royal Oak when you see the bezel, but the dial and the eagle eye texture that they do to it just puts it different than anything else that's out there that I am aware of. Tap 1999, welcome Tap, by the way, says, looks like a Chopard. It definitely, there is a look to Chopard, and this has it. This sort of, I want to call it like, it's not a sunburst, but they like to do these lines on dials where it feels like it's not the center where they're radiating their guilloche or their patterns from. They do it as if it was a flare, like a lens flare. That's probably a good way to say it. So this, it's everything seems to feel like it's irradiating out from the 6 o'clock subdial. An interesting touch, a very Chopard touch, but one that they do like to do on a number of their watches. And I personally do think come across as very attractive aesthetically. Tap continues, Chopard and Bulgari are good value brands, comparable. You didn't say comparable, comparable to Cartier. Yes, Bulgari, I need to try some of them on. I like the look of a number of not all the Bulgaris. I like the look of some of the Bulgaris. However, I've heard like the Octofinissimo, given how thin it is a very, try it on to be sure that it wears well on your particular shape of wrist sort of thing. So I've yet to do that. I did have a Cartier Santos 100. I thought about getting another Cartier. It is an excellent brand as well. A lot less usually oomph in the movement at this point. They tend to do a lot of Bosch movements, but their design language is at the top of the game. There's a reason why Cartier is number 2 to Rolex at this point in the Swiss watch industry in terms of money made via sales. Richard says, great craftsmanship. Absolutely. Very, very excellent set of watches. So anyway, just an interesting coincidence because I had that recent, a few days ago video about my favorite big date watches, and I just grabbed this one off of Chopard's website, and I didn't realize it had just come out. But again, the Lunar One has been around for a couple of decades at least. I think it introduced early 2000s, maybe late 90s. I'm not sure. I don't care enough to go back and check. Let's jump to our next watch. This is not going to be one that I personally love, but I love a lot about the brand. I had a video, gosh, maybe 2 years ago at this point, where I talked about brands I wish I liked. Like, I like the idea of the brand. Like, I like the notion of what the brand does, but then I can't find any watches that they have that I would want to wear. And Nomos Glashütte is that brand. Is probably the number one brand like that. So I wanted to go ahead and bring up, this is monochrome this time for the article. Again, link in the video description so you can go and read it. They have a new Ludwig Neomatik. They've done a number of collaborations over the years. I've covered some of them before. With Doctors Without Borders, one of my favorite charities, incidentally. So Doctors Without Borders is, if you're into video games, I know I'm not going to talk pinball for them. I'm going to talk video games. There is a group that speed runs for charity. It's called Games Done Quick. In January, they do awesome Games Done Quick. So they just did that for the Prevent Cancer Society. But in the summer, they do it for Doctors Without Borders, called Summer Games Done Quick. So I've done some contributions during that. But they have a partnership with Nomos, where Nomos likes to raise funding for the German arm, I believe, of Doctors Without Borders, or at least in this instance, I believe it's for the German arm. And so they have this new version of the Neomatik. The Doctors Without Borders ones are always pretty easy to identify because they put the 12 in, I think they always do. I think it's always the 12, but the 12 in red is in recognition of Doctors Without Borders. These is in 2 sizes. Both of them are limited to 250 pieces. And it's actually very, very affordable. So the smaller version is about 36.5 millimeters. It's about 2,900 euro. And then the larger version isn't much larger. It's 38.5 millimeters. And it's 3,050 euro, but 7 millimeters thick on both of them. They both use an automatic movements using the caliber DU W3001. It doesn't have much of a power reserve. It's only 43 hours. However, it's a very, very thin movement, and it is in-house. And I think, especially for the price point, very reasonably finished. Very nicely done in terms of Glashütte striping sort of approach. I've liked the movements on these. I've liked the price point. I like their casework, like in terms of their polishing. 2 things. I know a lot of people have a problem with Nomos over these lugs. These are very long lugs. This is not my issue, but I know a lot of people cannot get past these lugs. These watches wear very large, which is why they have this 36.3 or 4 millimeter smaller version in addition to the 38.5. These watches just wear very big because these lugs are long, very long. My problem is more fundamental because it kind of trickles through almost everything that Nomos does. Nomos' aesthetic is my problem. I like their movements. I like their finishing. I like their price points. But I don't like Bauhaus, not on a watch. A Bauhaus clock, I'm fine with. But when it came to wristwatches, Young Hans, Nomos, I just can't. Young Hans does stuff that's not the max bill. They do stuff that's not Bauhaus, but almost everything I've looked at, everything I can think of I've looked at from Nomos is Bauhaus, and it's too austere. And this is coming from someone who likes very conservative watch design. So where I could see the old-timey classical elegance in a Breguet, here it's too sterile for me. It's always been too sterile. And so I just can't get behind it. Pencil hands don't help matters. One of my biggest problems with the Vacheron Patrimony is the pencil handset. I just don't think it looks good on classical dials. Again, it is the Bauhaus design. I just don't like that design very clearly. I do not like the design, but I like the idea of this watch. The format of the watch is very legible. In terms of a time-only watch, if it wasn't this dial, I would like so much about it. But anyway, it's a charity I really, really like. So I wanted to talk about it anyway. I think it's a very interesting brand. Nomos has really held the line on a lot of pricing. If you want to explore in-house German watchmaking, like you want an in-house movement, definitely look at Nomos. If you like Bauhaus or are indifferent to it, I'd say take a look at their catalog. They have a lot of stuff with more color and stuff. So there are options, but their configurations tend to be this format. However, I mean, they have like California dials too, for example, still austere, and I don't like California dials either. So anyway, but I like the movements and stuff. So it's just one of those brands I've always wanted to like, but I can't find a watch from them that I enjoy. But pricing wise and stuff, I was surprised this wasn't more, given the 500 unit count, 250 of each size. So anyway, I wanted to throw it out there as an idea, because some people do really like this stuff. And if you are into Bauhaus, I don't know of anyone who's executing on it at the level that Nomos does. There are more affordable Junghans I mentioned. If you want Bauhaus, you could look at if you want to spend under $1,000, go ahead and look at Junghans. I don't know. I don't remember the name anymore. But Nomos Glashütte, if you want something with a higher degree of finishing. So, all right. Tap 1999 asks a question, and maybe the chat has answers on this. What's your view on the Nomos bracelet? Heard the dislike from other collectors. I have no opinion on it. I've never handled the bracelet. Most of the watches I've looked at from them are on strap anyway, so I can't weigh in on that. Koji says, you'd figure they put in a pulsometer for such a cause. Still waiting on a Nomos chronograph. I assume if they're going to do a Nomos chronograph, they're going to R&D their own in-house version of it, and that might be the holdback, because I heard the R&D to create your own in-house caliber chronograph is extreme. It's hard to R&D your own movement in general, and they've already done that. But chronograph is a lot of work, a lot of moving parts. It takes a long time to get the recoup on the investment generally, because how much would they want to price the watch at? A lot of questions there. The pulsometer is an interesting point, Koji. I think it's been too long, I can't remember. They may have done that on some of their other past collaborations. Here, they've clearly just kept it a very, very simple approach to the Neomatik. But I think they've done the Tangente before with Doctors Without Borders, and I think it's been more than just one other collab too. I just can't remember well enough. But anyway, I thought it's an interesting brand. And it's an interesting show. Usually you see all this stuff like saving the ocean and or stuff talking about celebrating space, Omega in space, and things like that. A lot of watch companies do stuff with charities, but I've only known Nomos to do Doctors Without Borders. But I'm willing to be stand corrected if others can name some other examples. Ball and Ducks Unlimited, like they work with them, stuff like that. All right. Let me jump to another watch that I really, really like, and a brand that I very rarely talk about, and that's Daniel Roth. So Daniel Roth has been rebooted, and they have just now come out with their second watch under this new reestablishment, and it's called the Extra Plat Souscription, not subscription, souscription, like a sous chef or something. I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter what we call it. What it looks like is what matters. This time the article is with Hodinkee. So here's the close-up. I like this a lot. Handset's different than I would have predicted, this sort of arrowhead handset style. However, I don't know if maybe it's just that this is honey gold. I don't know. I'm calling it honey gold. Daniel Roth doesn't call this honey gold, but Longa has honey gold. They only do it on their ultra limited stuff, and it looks so good. I'd like a watch in honey gold. I think blue with honey gold, or this shade, looks really, really good. And so again, the first watch Daniel Roth came out with, what was it, last year or 2 years ago? I don't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago, but it was a Tourbillon. So I didn't care. But here we go. Time only. Super simplified. You got Roman numerals in the center. You've got two different styles of guilloche done on two different machines by the same person by hand. It takes about 10 hours a dial for them to do the hand guilloche work. So this, much like the Chopard we discussed, is a hand guilloche piece of art. The double ellipse format of the Daniel Roth's case shape, again, kind of I was going to say It reminds me a lot of the older Gerald Gentas, but I like the it's called the double ellipse case. I like the double ellipse a lot better than like Patex's ellipse. The ellipse is interesting. I like the bracelet on the ellipse far more than I've ever liked the watch, if I could maybe put it that way, though it's grown on me over time. But the double ellipse, very interesting case shape. Not tonneau. It's just, it's the double ellipse. It's its own thing. Very, very attractive. Looks good on the strap. Very simple watch. Very small watch. Same size as the Tourbillon was. I think we jump down to the bottom of the article. You'll be able to see it is 38.6 millimeters by 35.5. So you'll probably think this watch is going to be way too small. But again, it is not a round watch. And I think, I don't know the size of the wrist in these photos, but to me, it looks like as a dress watch, it wears perfectly fine. This is definitely reasonable size for a dress watch. But even I took pause when I saw that the dimensions were basically at 38.6. So, okay, I'm not quite sure how long the lugs are. I guess we're still going to get up over 40 millimeters lug to lug, but not by a lot. That's a pretty short lug distance. But again, the shape of the watch, I think, lends itself very, very well. Very thin watch, under 8 millimeters thick. So that's going to be in line with a lot of the Breguet Classiques and Traditionals, I think. Classiques for sure are going to be around that. And not counting the micro rotor ones, which are going to get even smaller. Actually, it's a closed caseback watch also. So this is not going to be the main production catalog watch. You see the numero 00 here in this photo opposite of the caseback. That is because this is limited to 20 units, and this is not cheap. This is a 45,000 Swiss franc watch, and they are starting to do them this month. So anyway, 65-hour power reserve movement that they've got. They used La Fabrique de Temp. Louis Vuitton does the movement. Daniel Roth doesn't make their own movements. I'm assuming the movement is finished, but again, I guess this is what they do or what they've chosen to do, at least for the limited one, is just close case back and give you a solid gold back. 18 karat gold is, of course, the formulation of gold that they're using, but the colorway that they've got is an interesting. They call it yellow gold 3N. So they don't call it honey gold, but that's what it makes me think of. Anyway, I've seen some of the, there are historic Daniel Roths. There are a lot of, no, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are a number of watches that have this sort of double ellipse case shape. There's usually something on the dial that has always alienated me. This is my favorite one I have seen so far. Very, very, I like a lot about this. I like how they've done the case design with the edging. I like the lugs. I like the size is my one worry, that it might be a tad too small, though the photos give me confidence. But it'll be interesting when we see the mainline catalog one come out, see what looks different about it. That one will be more affordable than this. Daniel Roth is not a cheap brand as it's rebooted. But again, we've been looking at tourbillons so far. So it was interesting to finally see them in terms of kind of where they're wanting to position themselves when it comes to time only. This pricing, the 45,000, this is about on par with what Parmigiani is asking for their new Torics. If you remember the Torics that came out last year, I want to think they're in that $40,000 to $50,000 price range, new in precious metal, which I thought was a very ambitious price point for a brand like Parmigiani, which doesn't have a lot of mainstream recognition. I think Daniel Roth is in a similar boat, though Daniel Roth does get to rely on a more distinctive case shape, I think. Parmigiani has a very distinctive case shape when it comes to the Tonda with the teardrop lugs. The Toric, I don't think, even though I believe it was Michel Parmigiani's first design, I don't think the Toric has as an identifiable design language to the public eye as the Tonda ended up having. But one's mileage may vary, and we're not really here to talk about Parmigiani on this video. So anyway, those are my thoughts on this. I want to go ahead and get caught up with the chat, though it looks like some of you were still going ahead and talking about, even Universal Genève. So we'll go ahead and we'll just jump into it. Tap says, in-house chronograph, Kearns from Breitling suggested that Universal Genève might use B01 movement as new in-house chronograph because they are expensive to develop. Yes. And for those that aren't familiar as to why, Breitling and Universal Genève are under the same ownership now. I did a video, I think it was a live stream, where we talked a bit about the new designs of the pole routers that they unveiled. The watches are expected to go, I think it was 26 is when we're expecting to see Universal Genève start selling watches. So we have another year still to wait on that. However, it will be interesting to see what will happen. The one thing that so far happened is, and this was in line with what George Kurtz has also said, they're positioning Universal Genève as a higher price point than Breitling. I know Breitling has a huge spectrum, especially if you look at precious metal Breitlings. They're very, very expensive. Honestly, in my opinion, too expensive for what they have powering them. But Universal Genève historically was not a high-end luxury brand, and the pricing that they've been talking about is ambitious. The thing is, Universal Genève amongst collectors has name recognition that exceeds Daniel Roth or Parmigiani for that matter, bringing it back to what I was talking about earlier. So Koji says, how interesting. UG used to make very nice chronograph movements for other makers like JLC back in the 30s and 40s. And TAP has noted what I was discussing. UG was a value brand even in the 40s and 50s. Yeah, what Breitling's dreams are for them, where they're positioning them in the market, that is not where UG was. And in fact, pole routers were often, it still remain, the kind of affordable way for people who really want to get a Gerald Genta design. Like, that's the cheapest way to get a Gerald Genta, is to go and buy an old pole router. And so, I mean, and they don't have the greatest build quality, but they remain very, very popular and a bit of a darling amongst vintage collectors as well. What is not a darling with vintage collectors are swatches. Well, some of the older swatches, but not collab swatches with other Swatch brands. We will end with what the thumbnail was for this live stream, and that has to be the new Swatch Scuba. So we know about Blancpain and the Swatch collaborations a couple of years ago. They came out. They have the little nudie branches. They're mechanical. They're using that System 51 mechanical movement to power them. Some people liked them. They never took off in the same way that the Moon Swatch did. I think in part because the pricing was higher, and in part people like the Moon Watch and nobody knows the 50 Fathoms. Again, it's like a collector only thing. Like, Blancpain isn't in the same realm of discussion as Omega. So that did change a little bit, however, when the blacked out version, what was it, like the Sea of Storms or something? When that one came out, I think that was a last year release. I have heard that one actually, Ocean of Storms, that's what it's called, Ocean of Storms. That one did very well for them. I heard there was a lot of demand. People were really, really interested in it. So how do you answer like the blacked out military, hardcore version? Well, clearly you take a page out of Oris and you Miss Piggy the thing. So welcome to the Blancpain Swatch Scuba 50 Fathoms Pink Ocean. So now there are actually pink oceans. I did not know this. It got discussed. This is an article with Fratello. Link in the video description so you can go read it and look at all of their photos. There are pink bodies of water. It has to do with the bacteria and the conditions. I guess Australia has a whole bunch of them, but there are a few in some other places. I think Nambia has one. I think there's some maybe I don't know where. I don't know where there are. There's one. I don't know. It's in Iran. Somewhere in the Middle East also has a pink body of water. So that's what they say this is based off of. But the video, or excuse me, so the decision here was just to pink it out. So they found a pink nudie branch to go ahead and rely upon. But again, I don't know why they've done this. I've started to wonder if this is going to be is this a theme that was picked up on a few years ago? Because again, we had just recently on the last live stream discussed the Oris Miss Piggy watch, which was a weird amalgamation, in my opinion, of what is a very aggressive design. And I don't want to rehash all of it for you all, but you can see it here with this is Oris's website where I pulled this image from. But you can see the very aggressive turning, like an engine turbine of an aircraft here around the bezel. And then, of course, the bracelet is a pretty aggressive looking format that is used on this watch. And then they put a baguette diamond at the 12 o'clock position, shrink the sizing, and then put Miss Piggy on a display window in the back of the watch. A lot of weird decisions that were made there. This actually looks better executed overall, though here in the United States, I think this color would most immediately be identified as a Pepto-Bismol pink on the dial. And so, yes, it matches. They've kind of Fu made it. So like, it's not like the worst execution of pink I've ever seen, but I'm not quite sure who's going to buy this. And part of the reason is that it's no smaller than any other Blancpain Swatch collaboration that we've seen. It's still 42.3 millimeters in diameter. 48 millimeter lug to lug is relatively wearable, but if they're hoping women will buy it, it's still a pretty big watch. Some men, of course, might buy it and wear it, but it's not a small watch. It's 14 and a half almost millimeters thick. So again, they've gone with a two-piece strap here with the recycled fish nets or whatever they like to recycle from the ocean that they've been doing more recently rather than the NATO style format that they did early on. But I don't think this is the hit that maybe they were hoping for. It's a bit of a reach. I get that they're doing a lot of colorways, or they did initially with the Moon Swatch before, well, really from the get-go, and then they started to iterate on doing weird things like strawberry moons and Snoopies and Earth phases, and just dialing it to 11 on the stupid just to have different things to try and sell. And it's Swatch. It's meant to be fun. So I do understand that, but I'm just not sure what this is going for. But the Pepto-Bismol color alone, I think, sinks this as a viable shade. Not to mention there's almost a monochromatic look to the dial. So it's not the easiest to read either. So anyway, I wanted to mention it because I'm wondering now that and again, it's simply coincidence so far, right? But we did just see the Oris Miss Piggy come out. And now here we are a week later, and we've got the Blancpain pink, Swatch. It's a collaboration, but a Swatch Pink Ocean come out. We've often seen color trends. What was it, 2-3 years ago? Green was the dial color trend. Blue has been a dial color trend on occasion. Bronze cases were a trend. Is pink a trend? Because I just can't believe that it will be. But it's weird to see two fairly large brands, fairly well-known brands at least, come out with very, very, very pink watches. And that is not a color that has historically done very well for watch dials, unless it's salmon. Unless it's like that style of pink has done okay. There are some people who are big fans of salmon colored dials, but once you start to deviate from that shade of pink and you start moving into this sort of stuff, it gets a little weird, in my opinion. But anyway, those are my takes on it. But I see Koji's reaction to it is my eyes with a, yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty extreme. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like it, but I wanted to throw that out there as an idea. Hollywood Prince says, "Who is this guy? I'm Dennis. Welcome to the live stream." And if you don't like it, there are other channels that have a completely different approach than me. So, but I welcome you anyway. So yeah, this was the last watch I wanted to talk about on today from the new releases. Again, to me, this is just Swatch being Swatch. It feels like they kind of throw things at the wall to try and see what might sell and what might not sell. If the idea was to target a different demographic, I just don't see them doing it without changing the size, and I don't think they're willing to do the R&D to change the size of this watch. It's the Blancpain 50 Fathoms to do the collaboration sort of thing, and that it is the configuration that it is. So, I mean, that's kind of where it stands, but that's all I can think of to talk about on that one. So anyway, that's all I had for everyone. So we talked Chopard, right? Do a quick recap. We talked about the Chopard and the new Lunar One, which is probably my, I don't know. I'll say second favorite. It's my second favorite of today's discussion. We talked about the new Doctors Without Borders supporting limited edition watch. This is one of the Neomatics from Nomos Ludwig, which is a watch I do not like because I do not care for the Bauhaus design. However, I do like the price point on this, and I do like what Nomos is trying to do. This is my favorite watch of today's discussion. This is the Daniel Roth Extra Plat Souscription. I hate the name, but I do like this color of gold. I do like the guilloche work. I do like the simplified time-only approach and the move away from doing yet another tourbillon, which I care absolutely nothing for. And then probably the worst watch of the day. I just don't know who's buying a Pepto-Bismol watch. I don't care what your view of pink is. This should say Pepto. It should have a picture of a bottle of Pepto. It should be the Pepto-Bismol collaboration watch. I think they would move more units because at least then, like, Pepto Corporate would give it away as 5-year anniversary gifts or something. But nonetheless, we will ultimately see how it does on the market as reports come in. Well, Junior, thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in live. I really do appreciate it. Feel free to leave comments on any of the watches. If you're watching the recording, I do go back and check those as I noted. If you enjoyed the live stream, please give it a like. It helps other people find it and decide if they like it or not. And I'm going to go ahead and call it for today. I will be back next weekend to do another live stream, probably talking about new watch releases, but we'll see what happens. Otherwise, I'll pick a more esoteric topic and we'll discuss something about the hobby, broadly speaking. But that stuff tends to work a little bit better for panels, in my opinion. But if chat's engaged, I at least have something to interact against. So until next time, again, my name is Dennis. I hope y'all have a great weekend, and I'll talk to y'all on the next video.